Morning, everybody, and welcome to the Environment and Scrutiny Committee on the 3rd of March. As you'll all be aware these days, this meeting is being held remotely, but can be viewed on the County Council website at www.gloucestershire.gov.uk. My name's Rob Bird and I'm the chair. So we will get straight on with the agenda. And item 1, apologies for absence. We have apologies from Councillors Eva Ward and Keith Rippington. And as I understand it, there are no substitutes. All other members of the committee are present. Item 2 is minutes. And in fact, we have 2 sets of minutes to approve today. So I'll start with the first one. Meeting held on the 9th of December of last year. The minutes you've had in your agenda pack. Does anybody have any comment, or can I accept them as a true record of the meeting that took place? Members, anybody indicating? It doesn't look like it, in which case, Sophie, they're taken as printed. Thank you very much. And the second set of minutes is for the meeting held on the 13th of January of this year. Again, do any members have any comments to make? If so, please indicate now. Otherwise, I will accept them as a true record of the event. Okay, doesn't look like there's any response to that. So again, Sophie, thank you very much. We will record those as the minutes of the meeting. By the way, sorry, I should have said at the start, I will obviously, if members wish to speak, please raise a hand or make some gesture on your screen. And Sophie will keep me in line with who's indicating. Third item is declarations of interest. Again, does any member have any declaration to make? I see Councillor Orford. I'll start with you and then Councillor Caldwell. Councillor Orford.
Chair, just my normal in relation to anything wet with the interests I have, both of the council and my private ones. Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Caldwell.
Yes, on item 7, paragraph 1.2, the nuclear fusion item. If it gets into a debate, I shall have to declare an interest as a pensioner of Magnox, which is involved in this.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Caldwell. Any other declarations? I can't see any, in which case we shall move on. Okay, thank you, everybody. So we move on to the first main item on our agenda, item 4, which is a report into the December 2020 flooding from Gloucestershire as the lead local flood authority. And this is a summary report, and we need to consider this and decide on any action which comes out. And I think I'm handing over to James Blockley at this point. Is that correct? Yep. James, welcome and thank you.
Many thanks, Chair. Hopefully you've all seen the report and read it. Hopefully you found it acceptable, and hopefully it speaks for itself. I don't propose to go into any great depths in terms of introduction, because I think the report says it all, but I will just give a few brief headlines, if I may, before we go back for questions. Based on what we've learned so far, it's safe to say that December 23rd, 24th was the worst flooding event that has hit the county since 2007. We do have some updated figures, and I will update the main report. We now are looking at 454 flooding reports across the country, 307 of which were internal flooding issues. The main event was characterised, as I think we all know, by a period of short, intense rainfall over a wide geographic area with dramatic and sporadic and diverse effects. The main characteristic of the flooding was surface water flooding, and as lead local flood authority, we obviously have a keen vested interest in that. The main issue for me, coming out of this summary report and the immediate investigations we've done so far, is the fantastic response that was made to the event, a multi-agency response. It was effective, it was quick, it was focused, and it showed a clear evidence of solid partnership working and collaborative working and nobody working at cross purposes. We all came together in response to this event. So district councils, Gloucestershire Highways, Civil Protection Team, Fire and Rescue, Water and Sewage Companies, Environment Agency, ours as Lead Local Flood Authority, but perhaps more importantly, the communities themselves, people taking ownership of their own local issues and taking positive local action to protect themselves and their neighbours. Personally, I'm particularly proud of this response, and I think it shows how effective the county is in coming together to respond to these kind of events. I'm proud of my immediate team, and I'm very proud of my colleagues in the district councils as well. A good example of this was the multi-agency debrief sessions that were pulled together within about 24 hours of the new year starting to bring together all of those agencies, lessons learned, to agree some immediate next steps, and to pull together this rather complex data set into something that everybody around this table and everybody around the county can use to inform their future actions. Those models of the debrief sessions is something that's never been done before, and it's something that I'm quite proud of as Lead Local Flood Authority, that it shows that all of these agencies wanted to come together, wanted to work together, and wanted to avoid working at cross purposes. It's a model we can use for the future, and it's a model we will use for the future, and we can roll it out instantly next time. In terms of some of the key lessons learned, you'll have seen the report, but there's a couple that I wanted to raise. One of which being the role of the district officers, which can sometimes be overlooked in flood response. These are small teams. In most districts, it's a single officer, and they take on a multitude of duties, from immediate incident response, immediate investigation, short-term actions, and longer-term planning. We as Lead Local Flood Authority and all the other agencies rely on them heavily for this role, and I feel that the district officer role is hugely under-resourced, and if we are going to be ready for these kind of events, we need to shore up that local knowledge, that local support. We as Lead Local Flood Authority cannot do what we want to do without them. Again, the role of communities in this response. I've had meetings with various local communities, in particular the Tewkesbury Borough Flood Wardens, and I feel that on the ground local support, helping people, raising warnings, clearing access and egress routes for emergency services. These are people that take time out of their own day to protect their own communities. And something that really strikes me about this is they're realistic about it. They accept the reality of living in a flood-prone area. They don't sit on their hands and expect the authorities to rush to their defence. They're there. They're the first line of defence. And I feel that we should, as an extended organisation, do more to support these community groups, do more to help emerging groups get off the ground, do more to coordinate this community effort across the county. And I feel that's a role that we as Lead Local Flood Authority, with the correct level of resourcing, can roll out. Funding is another one. Government during flood events occasionally releases framework funding to assist with immediate recovery and short-term steps to build property level resilience. It's not being released for this event, even though we're looking at over 300 properties internally flooded. It's not being released. So I've had initial discussions with Councillor Moore and Councillor Smith about the potential to develop and release a Gloucestershire specific flood recovery fund. At best, if we get approval for that, and if there is, it will be another month before those grants are rolled out. That's not soon enough. This flood hit on December the 23rd. I feel that there is scope across the organisations that have a flood remit to make sure there is a fund that is ready to go when these events hit, so people are not left hanging, not left in the balance. Attention on flood resilience is often concentrated on where the effects are felt. That's not enough. We need to look on a much wider basis. We need to look at upper catchment based flood management. We need to look at where the rain falls and do what we can to hold it there, to reduce the amount of flow hitting these downstream communities. And that's something that we are already working on and something we will concentrate our efforts on in future, not least through the Innovation Resilience Programme that, fingers crossed, will bring about £1.4 million into the county for measures to work with natural processes. So there's some of the lessons learned. What are we going to do next? Quite a lot, I hope. First of all, we're starting to develop some solid local partnerships based on a multi-agency model to look at these local issues and to build local interest and local response to the incidents. We're going to be carrying out a range of detailed investigations into the event, starting with the worst hit communities. This will involve action planning, hydrological modelling, looking at where pinch points are, looking at what can be done to increase resilience of these communities. We're also looking at a range of short-term actions in some of the worst hit communities. For example, Bledington in the Cotswolds, where 29 properties were internally flooded. We've already had a multi-agency meeting with people there, and I've pledged to support some short-term measures to prevent the immediate effects of the four main rivers that hit the community. We're taking that approach in other communities as well, looking at, I don't like the phrase quick wins because I don't see them as wins, but immediate measures that we can do now to show that we're doing something and to prove that we are committed and to genuinely reduce the impacts on these communities with the events that are going to be coming. Backing up those immediate short-term actions, we're going to be developing our long-term strategy, our local flood risk management strategy. This will be very much informed by our priority approach, and that priority approach will be informed by this event. We'll plug in the numbers, and the communities that were worst hit by this event will therefore get more action. I would like to explore the possibility of a Gloucestershire Flood Relief Fund. I'm hoping to discuss this with my district colleagues in the very near future, and I will be coming back with a firm proposal on that in due course. I would like to support an investigation or a summary of the district flood officer role. I'd like to see what could be done to shore that up, whether that means that we develop an in-house resource at Gloucestershire County Council as part of my team that could work with communities in times where there is no flooding, but then work alongside the districts in incident response and incident investigation when there are flooding events. The possibilities are endless, but it's something I think we need to consider. The report that you've had, there has been a few small updates since you saw it. I intend, with the committee's approval, to publish that on our website, not as a Section 19 report, but just as a Gloucestershire County Council specific flood summary. So people can see the figures, so people can see the benefit of the multi-agency approach, see what we did, and to feed into the process in future. That's a very short rundown of next steps. There will be a lot more going on behind the scenes than that, and I would very much welcome the committee's input into what you feel should happen in the short. So to sum up, as I say, the worst event since 2007, with significant effects. One of the positive messages I think we can take from this is that since 2007, we've invested a substantial amount of money in flood awareness and flood resilience, and that investment has had a noticeably positive effect in numerous communities across the county. We should be proud as Gloucestershire County Council of what we've done to build flood resilience, and this event has shown that that has had some effect. Not enough, surely, definitely not enough, but it has had a positive effect. I think we need to be proud of the multi-agency approach and the well-coordinated response that we made to the event. Again, there's still room for improvement. There always will be, but I think we should be proud of what we've done. In short, we need to do more. We need to do more to build resilience if we're going to be ready for the increased frequency of these kind of short, flashy surface water flooding events that climate change will certainly bring. And I look forward to working with everybody to make that happen. That's about all I wanted to say as a short introduction, but I'm more than happy to take any questions and look forward to hearing what you think. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, James. Thank you very much indeed. So I will pass it out now to the committee and ask. I think I've gone. Hello, Sophie, can you hear me?
We can hear you, Rob. We can't see you, though. It might be worth turning your camera off. Can you hear us okay?
I can now. For a moment, everything froze up on my screen and I couldn't hear anything. And so I said, I don't know if you heard me, Sophie. I said, Sophie, can you hear me? And yeah.
We could hear you, yeah. We couldn't see you, though, but it looks back to normal now.
Yeah, okay, right. I'll start again. Thank you. I thought I'd completely lost internet contact then, but obviously not. So, yeah, James, thank you. As I said, so over to committee members for comments and any questions back to James. And I see first up, I noticed, sorry to the others, but first up I noticed was Councillor Orford. Then I see Councillor Caldwell, and any others I will come to after that. So, Councillor Orford.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, James, for a very comprehensive report. I don't think we've seen anything like this on flooding since the Scrutiny inquiry of 2007. So, congratulations to everyone who obviously put a lot of work into bringing the figures and all the detail together. And I ought to start also with my thanks, because Dave Norman's online, to GFRS in relation to the work they did in my community. I was going to raise a point there about the one issue I had, because people usually come looking for district or a county councillor. I was a little disappointed that I was told to get a response. Every individual that was at risk was going to have to ring the fire service, and I think that's something we need to look at. Having said that, we did get an action too late on the 23rd. We did have properties flooded, but at least they were there and opened the street up for Christmas Eve. In relation to flood fund, there already is one. We had a meeting of trustees yesterday, so I better declare the interest in what was originally the 2007 flood appeal. There is a reserve of finance left in that. We've still got issues with the Charities Commission because the M&Os need to change, because originally it was just for 2007 flood victims. And I know the chair of trustees is keen to make that an ongoing flood fund. In fact, the chair is the CEO of Tewkesbury Borough Council. We're only 3 trustees. It's myself, Mr. Dawson, and Mr. Cook from Gloucester City Council. But the appeal always was based on a Gloucestershire, and this is where I was interested in Bledington in particular. It is a Gloucestershire-wide fund, and ultimately, when we get everything opened up, then we would be perhaps looking for trustees from every district. I don't think there's anything confidential in that. I don't want to obvious this because you know, I got water on the brain and I could talk on it all morning. But the figures, I did give the figures yesterday at our meeting of trustees, and I think fair to say there was an element of surprise as to just how many properties had been impacted with what we call internal flooding. In other words, inside the main house. We do know lots of garages caught it, but the flood fund itself would only extend to inside the main living area. But we are open to do, well, grants to people who have suffered, particularly over this latest event. I'll leave it at that, but I might well come back in later on, Chair, because I don't want to bore people. Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Orford. I mean, you made some specific remarks there. James, did you want to comment on any of those before I go to Councillor Caldwell, or is that you just...
No, just thanks, Phil, and sorry, Councillor Orford, and we will surely pick up that conversation. I was aware of that fund, and we made some investigations into it after the February flooding. So I think if we can approach this as a group effort with district officers doing on the ground advocacy and us administering the fund as county, perhaps that's something we need to pick up as a matter of some urgency outside of this meeting. I haven't raised expectations externally. I haven't raised this. I've only discussed it with district councils. So yeah, I think it would be great if we could have a fairly urgent discussion about that. If you want to contact me at your convenience, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thanks, James. Next was Councillor, Caldwell. I'm getting I was about to say, and then I've got Councillor Cromwell. Sorry, Councillor Caldwell.
Thank you. Thanks very much indeed for your report, James. I share Phil's appreciation for it. Towards the bottom of page 23, it mentions the large number of hundreds of issues being reported by members of the public. I wondered how we were getting on in tackling those, because I have had comments from a couple of local parish councils, and I've told them to be patient because of the larger issues that are involved throughout the county.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Caldwell. I will stress that this report is very much a group effort on behalf of the members of my team and our extended partners. I'm not going to take sole credit for that, but thank you anyway. Yes, inquiries, and it's been a substantial job trying to manage people's expectations, and I'm very grateful to you and to all of the other councillors who have been doing what they can to help manage those local expectations. I'm in this job, we're all in this job because we want to help people, and we want to help people help themselves with regards to flooding. We can't be everywhere at once, and I know you know that, and I'm sure the communities understand that. We will get to everybody. We're having to concentrate our efforts on the places that were worst hit, and that's just the way things go. There are some situations with individual householders or a small number of householders, say Addlestrop and Walton Cardiff village near Tewkesbury, where we're taking some direct action on a very small number of properties. But generally speaking, we do have to concentrate our efforts. And I think the way forward is to look at the worst hit communities and instigate this strategic multi-agency approach. So it's not just one agency going in. We need to work with, say, for example, Cirencester. We very much need to work with the water and sewage companies, where the issues surrounding sewage discharge was so much a centre of the problem. If we're going to have a meaningful long-term effect, we need to work in partnership. So in brief answer to your question, we will get to everybody. We'll start with the most important. We will look at some immediate actions, but that needs to be second place to a longer-term coordinated strategic multi-agency approach. But thank you for your advocacy.
Okay, Councillor Caldwell. Yep.
Yes, that's fine.
Fine. Okay, Councillor Cromwell, thank you.
Yes, thanks very much, Chair, and yeah, thanks, James. Very, very good. I mean, obviously, you know, Tewkesbury is somewhere that floods, you know, on a regular basis, as we all know. But there were a few issues from the last ones in December, obviously being the worst. One of the issues that I have was it was a complaint made against the Environment Agency about not phoning people or letting people know that we're at risk. on the you know, on the media, on the TV, on the news. And then as a knee-jerk reaction to that, they then phoned people at 4 o'clock in the morning on the second flood, and they frightened the living daylights out of people at 4 o'clock in the morning, you know, when they could have actually done it, you know, at a sensible time for them, because they were beyond their worst point at the time they phoned them. So actually, they were then really worried, because actually they thought it was going to get worse when it was actually at its worst point. So they really didn't help us as councillors or you either, because what they did was they sent the hares running then. So I don't know whether we can talk to the Environment Agency about sorting that problem out, if possible, please. The other one is you say about the grants, and I totally agree with you. We have got to get those sorted and ready to go, because I mean, you know, I know of an 83-year-old lady that was flooded out in December. She's now back in the house, or she's always been in the house. It's all fully sorted. It's all done. So, you know, a grant to her now is little or no use, because she's already sorted herself out. And the one issue she did have was with the ditch. That, you know, there was an argument over who was responsible, and I'm pleased to know that we are going to sort it as the county council. But there was an argument again with the Environment Agency over whose responsibility for that ditch it was. And to be honest with you, we're clearing a ditch out well after the latest flooded, and in 2007 it was cleared out because of the issues it caused. Who's monitoring this going forward? Who is checking on these ditches to make sure that they're right, not doing it after the event? And, you know, that's my question really. Going forward, we want to be, you know, more proactive than we are responsive, if that makes sense, because obviously on some of these events they could be potentially prevented a little bit if we did do it previous rather than after. So, but thanks to the report, James, and yes, we are doing an awful lot, and yes, Tewkesbury is a place that does flood. You know, I suffered 2 foot of water in 2007. I didn't suffer it this time, but I do think that, you know, people are frightened of 2007 again, and of course it does. Whenever the Environment Agency rings somebody, they immediately go back to 2007 when they did have water in their house, and maybe that's something that we need to be a little bit more careful on what we say and how we say it and the manner in which we say it. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Caldwell.
If I could come back to those in turn, and please forgive me, I think there was 4 points there. First one being Environment Agency and flood warnings. I did make reference to that in my report. The report was a Gloucestershire County Council report, so there wasn't any scope for the Environment Agency to come back on that. I think it's fair to say that other risk management authorities had noticed that perhaps the peaks with rivers were underplayed and the lulls were perhaps overplayed. The Environment Agency is aware of this, and we work closely with them as one of our most immediate and most helpful partners. I do have a meeting with Environment Agency on Friday to discuss a couple of infrastructure issues and flood warning issues. One of the things that we can do locally on ordinary watercourses is investigate level gauges with telemetry, so local communities' flood wardens can monitor those river level gauges and perhaps take more proactive, immediate local action on alerting communities. I had a conversation with the Tewkesbury flood warden this week or last week, and I've pledged to look into level gauge on the Swill Gate for that purpose. With regards to the grants, I think it's important to point out that grants would be for resilience and resistance measures. So resilience measures being helping homes be more ready to clear themselves out. So things like raising plug sockets off ground level, making sure that the recovery can happen as quickly as possible. And then resistance, so we're looking at things like floodgates, non-return valves on air bricks, those kind of things, property flood resilience measures. What this grant, I think, should not fund is the immediate recovery, the cost of cleanup, the cost of new carpets, those kind of things. That has to be an insurance company issue. I'm open to disagreement on that, but I think we need to be looking at resilience and resistance, not recovery. I think in terms of the local communities you mentioned, I go back to what I said about the Tewkesbury flood wardens as an example, and the fact that they take a very pragmatic, realistic view to this. And I think, again, what we need to do is to act as local, a local alert system, a local response vehicle, and to help communicate that risk to their neighbours. I may need a brief reminder on your third point, Councillor Cromwell, but they were the two that leapt out for me.
Sorry, James. I did probably ramble on a little bit in between the questions as well. I do apologise, but it is.
No, that's fine.
I'm a little bit like Phil, to be honest. If it's flooding, along with Vernon Smith, we have got, it's a particular issue of ours. The other one was, obviously about resilience and about obviously, arguments about the ditches, about the ditch, which ditch. What are we doing to go forward to make sure that we don't clear that ditch out after 2007 because it will help, and then the ditch slowly fills itself up. Nobody clears it out again until after December 2020. Because it becomes an argument and an issue after the floods. What are we doing to make sure that it becomes an issue before the floods?
Yeah, absolutely. As you probably know, that management of watercourses is the responsibility of the person who owns that watercourse, riparian ownership. So ultimately, it comes down to whoever owns the land through which that watercourse passes. We can advise and we can monitor. Again, district council officers carry out the ordinary watercourse consenting and enforcing activity, which is our responsibility, but we delegate that to the districts under an agency agreement. So they would, if a report of a silted up or overgrown watercourse is made aware to them, then they can act to encourage the riparian owners to carry out the necessary maintenance. I know in some occasions we have stepped outside of that and taken direct action, but ultimately I think we need to do more to encourage riparian owners to fulfil their obligations to those watercourses. Something that is perhaps important to note that our Waterside Living Guide, which sets out the roles and responsibilities of riparian owners, we are going to be updating that in due course, because sometimes an obstruction on a watercourse is a good thing. Whether that's a woody debris dam or a renaturalized watercourse with a natural bend in it to slow the flow, a clean, straight, well-drained watercourse is not always what we want to see. So we need to take a holistic view of ordinary watercourse management. We need to encourage landowners to fulfil their obligations, and we need to work closely with the districts to make sure that any enforcement being the very last port of call, we would do everything we can to reach a collaborative agreement before we go down that route. And I'm proud to say that we rarely have to take formal enforcement action. But yeah, I mean, it is a riparian responsibility, but we can't leave people to deal with things on their own, and we have to advise and encourage and make sure that they're doing things in the right way. And I think that's what we'll continue to do.
Councillor Cromwell?
I mean, this particular ditch isn't a riparian issue. It was an argument between the Environment Agency, because we said it wasn't our responsibility, and then it was then the railway's responsibility, and on it went. And these sort of things, really, we don't need to be having those arguments. We need to know who is, so that, after 2007, when it was cleared, we actually have it listed down who's responsible, and we get it cleared, and it's kept clear. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cromwell. Councillor Patel.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, thank you very much for the report, James. It's really comprehensive, and the information gives us a really good idea of the scale of the problem we have across the county, not just in one particular area. I think it's a really good example you've given us of the December floods, of the fantastic partnership working and engagement that has built up. I think from the 2007 floods onwards. So that's really good to see the sort of the team working and the response, the immediate response. Got a couple of points really, and maybe questions as well. One or two questions. The report states that on the 23rd of December, the highways received large volumes of calls. Do we have any idea of numbers? That's a question. The report also mentions that 37 days of reactive jetting resource was used across the county in January, and this is going on from Councillor Cromwell's point about sort of clearing, whether it's ditches, brooks, or block gullies, rather than having that reactive service. Perhaps there does need to be more focus on proactive service. I know the report mentioned that. There are sometimes issues with cars obstructing the gullies. I mean, in my own ward, I can give you an example where a resident had been chasing highways for. In the end, it took more than 6 months, but we did get it done last week, thankfully. Where when the crews arrived, there was cars parked in front of in front of the gully, which made access impossible. But then we have the issues around GDPR and the problems that brings as well, because the highways team had, in this case, the address and the phone number of the resident involved. He was the one who had parked his car by the drain to prevent anyone else parking there. And on one particular visit, he even had big posters on the window saying, "This is my car parked here for the gully cleaning crew." But they came, they saw there was a car there, and they went. They didn't stop. They didn't look at the note. They didn't try and make contact because they didn't have the gentleman's address. And I think that GDPR has become a blocking point in these sort of circumstances. So whether anything more can be done around that to help ensure that we can, on the first visit, we can try and get these gullies clean, rather than having to, arrange repeated visits and still unsuccessful because of the time and the cost involved with that and the resource. And my final question is, in all the properties that flooded in December, are we aware of any flood alleviation programs that are in the pipeline for those areas which are still pending at the moment? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Patel. Yes, I'll come back on that. Gloucestershire County Council flood response, as I say, is a team effort. We have Lead Local Flood Authority, but we also have Gloucestershire Highways. And we work very, very closely together. We have regular meetings. They were a key member of the immediate debrief sessions. I can't comment on specifics. I can see that Kath has said that there were 200 calls by 6 p.m. on the 23rd of December, which is significant. And you'll see from my report that they've already taken some proactive steps to improve their work processes and to create these flood desks to better manage those calls. Which again is a good example of us as an organisation acting on lessons learned and taking proactive action as a result. In terms of jetting cycles, again, I can't comment on the specifics, but what I will say is that the money that is spent in Gloucestershire, which exceeds the annual 2.1 million, a big portion of that is directed exclusively to an enhanced maintenance regime for highway drainage management. And the gangs do indeed have an ongoing issue with parked vehicles, and that's something that they would have to address on a the specifics of the case you mentioned. But I'm sure that any sort of detailed questions will be picked up by Kath and her team. In terms of a programme of flood alleviation schemes, yes, we do. As I say, we've got some short-term aims that we're going to be, short-term measures that we're going to be putting in place for some of the worst hit communities, but we do have a fairly extensive capital programme of flood alleviation work. At the moment, we're working in a number of locations. These are schemes that we're leading on ourselves, and also schemes that we are funding through the district councils. Big schemes in Colford, Nailsworth, Pittville. We're looking at a longer term plan for Bishop's Cleeve and Woodmancote. The list goes on. If there are any particular areas that you would like me to expand on, I'm happy to do that outside of this meeting. But our capital programme, which is publicly available, would give you the basic information on that. But as I say, happy to come back on any specifics, Councillor Patel.
Councillor Patel?
Yeah, thank you very much for that, James. I really appreciate that. I just wanted to add that, I think if it wasn't for the work and the schemes that have been completed after 2007, the situation could have been a lot worse this time around. But I just wanted to also touch on another point, which is planning. I'm not sure how much influence we can have on planning, because we still see, for example, in Longford, where they're building houses on areas and land that's consistently flooding. I just wonder whether there's anything more we can do to influence that, because the result of that will be in the future, no doubt, when we have heavy rainfall in short space of time, more flooding, and that will just simply create extra costs, extra resource, extra burden on highways and all our partners.
Chair, would you like me to come back on Councillor Patel's most recent point, or did you want to go over to Kath Howard for the highways element? I'm happy either way.
If you could respond to Councillor Patel's point just then, and then we'll go to Kath, and then I see Nigel Moore is coming in as cabinet member, and then I think Councillor Orford will go to that. We'll do it in that order, please.
Okay, thank you. So in response to the question about planning, as lead local flood authority, we're statutory with regards to flood risk. So every planning application that comes in that's over 1 hectare or 0.1 hectares ground area or 10 dwellings or more, we comment on. We make sure that the flood risk, the runoff, the rate that the water hits the ground and leaves the site is no greater than it was before the development was there. And we would achieve that through sustainable drainage systems and a range of other measures. If we felt that there was an application that was going to increase flood risk, either on-site or off-site, we would recommend to the local planning authority a range of conditions on that planning application to make sure that that flood risk is managed. That's a key part of our role. We have two people on the team who work almost full-time on purely planning related issues, and that goes from smaller developments right up to major schemes like the Missing Link and the two M5 junctions. That is a key part of our team, a key part of what we do. And again, working closely with the district councils on the minor planning applications, and they do exactly the same for those developments that fall under our threshold. So that's what we do on a reactive basis. On a proactive basis, it's something that we need to take a strategic approach on at a county-wide level. But I am satisfied that through the work of my team and through the districts, that development is managed in a flood-sensitive way. There is a public misconception that we're building on the floodplain, regardless of risk to communities, and that is not the case. We manage that flood risk and we provide good, regular, prompt advice within 21 working days to local planning authorities to make sure that they impose the correct conditions on the development.
Thanks, James. If I could bring in then Kath.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to pick up on the couple of points that Councillor Patel had made there around number of calls that we received and the gully
Kath, you might need to turn your video off. It's not very clear.
Just to put a bit of context, I suppose, around the 23rd of December, 6 p.m. that afternoon, our in-hours contact team had taken over 200 calls just related to water on the network and flooding incidents, and bearing in mind that the worst the weather didn't hit us until as well. So yeah, it certainly was a very specific areas in urban areas where we are ditch streets of parked vehicle to get into lenses, and we certainly do that in Cheltenham. So true to say that that's become more because we've got lots of people working from home with their cars still parked outside the house. So that is certainly an area of focus for us as to how we can get that better. We do look at the particular roads and what the risks are around those roads, and that side of things in terms of trying to design the programme to give us the best opportunity. So perhaps going in early morning or late evening for some types of roads, and for other roads it's better to go in midday when the majority of people are out at work. So there is a variety of approaches to that, but it's certainly something that continues to be a challenge, and it's something that we are keen to work closely with our district colleagues on, in particular, because obviously if we can get all the vehicles out to cleanse the gullies, we can also get our road sweepers in there and do some of the other activities that we might not otherwise have the opportunity to do. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Kath. Councillor Patel, a lot of that was disturbed. Sorry, Kath, but so does that? Were we able to get an answer to your question there? Yeah. Okay. I'll move on then to Councillor Nigel Moore, and who's been waiting patiently to come in.
Yeah, very patiently, because I'm finding this discussion very constructive. Good morning, Chairman. Good morning, everybody. I think what's emerged, I had at least three communities in my division very adversely affected by the events before Christmas. There's Morton, Bledington, and the Swells. I think what's emerged, and of course it's quite a long time since 2007, is the complexity of the agencies involved and the scale of the problem across all of our communities. And I think what's really important, it's already happening in the conversations we're having today, is the really important role for county councillors to act both as local advocates for their communities, and also, as has already been intimated, to manage expectations. That's particularly important given the scale of the problem across the whole county. James and Vernon and I discussed this yesterday, and we would very much like to support that role of local advocacy, and also basically to look at ways in which we, as the lead flood authority, can both encourage it and support it. I think it is crucial because the sheer scale of these events and the likelihood of these events occurring on a more frequent basis means this is not something we can just deal with every few years. It's something that really has to be a real part of our role as county councillors. we have the real advantage and benefit of knowing our communities very well, unequaled probably from anyone else within the agencies. And so that's the crucial role, I think, for county councillors. So it's just a heads up at the moment. We want to do more work on this, and as and when we have done that, we can obviously bring that back to this committee and expand on it further. But I just wanted to take the opportunity today, Chairman, to make that point, and it's something we're very conscious of.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I think Councillor Orford had been indicating. Am I right, Councillor Orford?
Yeah, thanks. I'm not going to prolong this too long because Nigel's made some very relevant points there. In relation to schemes, etc., James will know because he supports me on the regional flood defence committees. We are at the start of the new 6-year programme, and as I said, I think it was to Councillor Hodgkinson a couple of months ago, if there are issues on the Cotswolds, etc., if it falls under the remit of the RFDCs that I fit on, I'm hoping people will bring those schemes forward that we can use local levy to support, because obviously you're talking about, well, 300 properties, for instance. It just shows how complex the network is, who's going to pay for what, and local levy is a way that we bring those schemes forward. I would agree that since 2007, I think had the scheme not been done on the outskirts of Gloucester, we would have been looking at something far more serious. We know that scheme protects at least 300 properties in the area of Long Levens, for instance. But I don't want to prolong it because, as I said, I could talk for England on water, and perhaps this isn't the place for me to do it. But again, thanks to James and the team for a very comprehensive report, and I'm looking forward as to how we take all this forward. I will raise the point at the RFDC. James has said he's got a meeting with the EA on Friday, but James will know that I'm always at the RFDCs on flood warnings and the language used, and Kevin's point about 4 o'clock in the morning just purely wasn't appropriate. And I will be bringing that one up at the RFDC. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you. Councillor Vernon-Smith.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and good morning, everybody. Yeah, and first of all, I've got to say to James and the team, and to Highways as well for their input. I think it is a really excellent report, and so quickly put together. I think is something that, you know, I can acknowledge personally, and I'm sure from county council members, we're very impressed at the speed and time and the detail that you've got into the report. Clearly, you know, obviously the very good points is from the Gloucester Fire and Rescue Service, proactive, working together, the teamwork, Highways, Gloucestershire Highways, out and about working, district support, and obviously good involvement from local volunteers, as you said, James. Yeah, I have to say, Chair Committee, disappointed in the Environment Agency in some ways, and I'm not going to talk about the flood alerts. Councillor Cromwell covered that quite very well and raises very good points, and I know James and the team will be taking that up with the Environment Agency. But I did sense their absence on the ground. There was a lot of interaction in the thing we all are aware of and we understand with a flood is they are individual events, and you have to react at the time and triage what is important, how to get, where to get, who to help, where to help. And I did see that team working really well, as I say, across the fire and rescue, highways, districts and county councillors. You know, I'd like to thank Councillor Alford and Councillor Cromwell personally. I know what they were doing out and about and working with residents, with the services to assist on people that were concerned with flooding or had a flooding issue. And obviously, I also relate to Councillor Cromwell's point where I was spending a lot of my time reassuring people that they weren't going to flood because of the automated flooding system that decided to tell everyone in a location that they were all immediately going to flood, which was a problem, which obviously we will pick up with the Environment Agency. Just a couple of points, Chair. I really appreciate what Councillor Patel said about the flooding works that have been done, and I don't want this to sound like, oh right, okay, we've done a lot of work so everything's fine. That's certainly not. We need to be vigilant and we need to keep doing, and myself and Councillor Moore are very keen to see that flood alleviation programme keep moving forward, as Councillor Moore has said about some local issues where we immediately affect. And again, just on the back of what James has said with the highways issue at Walton Cardiff, really pleased. Gloucestershire Highways already working with James yourself, I think, actually visited the site for a resident in Walton Cardiff, that we're going to look at some culverts there. We have stepped up to the plate. We have moved forward to try and resolve a local issue very quickly, and also the one that Councillor Conwell raised, we're also trying to resolve that one as quickly as possible. So on the back of what Councillor Patel said, just for the committee, working with our stakeholders, we have spent nearly, and officers will correct me if I'm wrong, it might be more now, it's around 50 million since 2007 on flood alleviation schemes. And I think that is something that we as the County Council should be proud of. Working with Environment Agency, working with district councils, working with highways, we have been able to keep pushing in flood alleviation projects forward. So that report that is come to you today, if you look at the volumes of rainfall, what is most significant to me is this is one of the highest events since 2007 by volumes of water. And we need to take that into account, because that, with the background of that 50 million of flood alleviation works, for example, for the committee, Wadden Road, Cheltenham, 500 properties there last year protected now from risk of flooding, from a massive retenuation pond, 2.41 million. Again, officers are correct me if I've got that wrong. I think it's around 2.1 or 2.4 million. That scheme we put in there is worked well in the current events, and that is helping. But obviously we need to keep doing more. On the background of what Councillor Moore said, I fully support. I think that is a good way forward, that we could get some local county council involvement with groups, committees, to try and evaluate and understand local issues. I know from down Lydney area there are issues, and Alan Priest I know is very keen to get involved in that, Councillor Priest I should say, in that area, and we need to keep progressing forward. My personal feelings is I do feel that, you know, I'm thinking of considering a letter of some sort to have a look at the Environment Agency, to ask maybe whether its remit now, from 1995 it was set up, if its remit is in today's circumstances appropriate or could be strengthened in ways. So I'll be considering that over the next few days, having listened to the committee today. But I do appreciate all the comments made, and finally, again, an excellent report that we can build on moving forward. Thank you, Chair.
You're on mute, Rob. You're on mute.
Chairman's on mute.
One of the hazards of today's working, indeed. The number of times I get that in a day. As I said, I think I have Councillors Patrick Molyneux and Councillors Dave Norman indicating that they wanted to come in. So I'll go first to Patrick, if that's all right.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. And yes, James, a very good report and lots of interesting stuff. I've got a little aside, actually. You talked about needing to hold back water higher upstream in catchment areas. I'm sure in at Lydbrook there was a scheme with beavers. I've not heard much about it. Is that scheme with forestry still going? It did stop because of some disease, I think, and if it's still there, did that have any impact whatsoever on the flooding?
Yeah, you're quite right. I think one of the beavers fell ill and had to be removed from the project. I don't have any up-to-date information on that project. It is proper sharp-end natural flood management. I mean, talking about working with natural processes, that's about as natural as you can get. I know the beavers were in an enclosed area to avoid any sort of other impacts off the site, but it was led, if I'm correct, by Forestry England. I am going to be working with them, and I've been in contact with Kevin Stannard from Forestry England about a coordinated approach for the whole of the Forest of Dean, looking at working with natural processes and building on the work that Joe Baker and my team is doing in Lydney, and other members of my team are doing across the Forest of Dean. So in terms of the actual beavers, I'm afraid I don't have any up-to-date information for you, but I can easily find out, because it's something that I myself find particularly interesting as a flood management technique. Yeah. Thank you.
Well, it would be interesting considering the figures you've got here for Lydbrook of that period. So
yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
And I'll over to Councillor Dave Norman. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much. And obviously, you would expect me to follow the very positive comments that colleagues have made in respect of the work of the Fire and Rescue Service in the very, very challenging times that were faced. There has been some comment made about the role of the Fire and Rescue Service and why sometimes we're not able to actually get in and sort issues out because you have to decide whether your work in a particular incident or in a particular area is clearly what is needed at that time. Reminding members that the primary responsibility of any fire and rescue service is to preserve life and protect property. And the issues around preserving life have got to be the situations where people have found themselves in difficulties from floodwaters, maybe even some people who decide to drive into floodwater, and I can never understand why they would do that. And then that requires a crew with the appropriate resources to go and extricate them from the situation they find themselves in. The issue around protecting property, I know sometimes people get very frustrated when the Fire and Rescue Service can't pump out less than 1 inch of water from a property or from a basement. But there is no direct effect to that property unless it's affecting the electrics. And then clearly the Fire and Rescue Service have a responsibility to try and remove that water to try and ensure that the water doesn't come into contact with the electrical systems in the property. I can remember 2007 very clearly because I was still operational. And when Kevin talks about Tewkesbury, I stood there with the water above my waist. And there's no doubt that what has been done in the last 12 to 14 years has made a significant difference to what is happening in these increasing amounts of water that we're experiencing. In summary, Chair, I want to say that the Fire and Rescue Service has a distinct role to play as a partner in the authority. And will continue to do that. We'll continue to work with highways. And it's not about the number of calls that are received. I think Kath mentioned about 200 at a certain time. Fire control received over 330. So it's not about league tables or positions in the league. It's about working together, deploying resources where they can be most effectively deployed and carry out what is required. And I'll finish by saying once again, the primary role is to preserve life and protect property where we can. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Dave. At the moment, I'm not aware of anybody else indicating that they want to...
Councillor Williams has got her hand up as well.
Ah, sorry. Right. I will... There we go then. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Councillor Bird. I do apologise, I haven't got my camera on because everything just keeps disappearing when I do that, so it's just me, unfortunately. I just wanted to agree with what was said about these early morning calls. I am sort of still Downs flood warden for my area from 2007, where we have got a lovely flood wall, which unfortunately failed because there was a point where it sort of came over, and once it came onto the estate, that was it. It just came flooding in with nowhere else for it to go. I also wanted to mention about, also with regard to the flood wardens, we have recently been contacted by Cheltenham Borough Council, who are looking to make sure that's still ongoing, that there are still people around and about in the areas. The only other thing I wanted to mention was what I can't remember, I think it's now Councillor Moore mentioned about being advocates for our areas. That is fantastic, and we do. But when we sort of phone things in and we get reports of, well, yeah, it's okay, don't worry, it'll be okay in an hour, or no, that drain was cleared back in sort of a few months ago, and it's absolutely fine. Well, obviously, if the area is flooding, it's not fine. And it does get quite near to people's houses. Luckily, it hasn't actually gone into people's houses as yet. But if there's an issue there and we bring it to the authorities, being brushed off, saying it's fine, is not really good enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Did any officer want to respond, or do we move on?
So something that I put, if I may, Chair, something that came out of the debrief sessions bears out what was just said about contacts. I think one of the issues was local members and perhaps communities were not 100% clear on who to contact in which situation for what kind of flooding. So one of the outputs from the debrief sessions was Appendix 3 on the report, which hopefully, I think Sophie put it in as a separate attachment, thank you, Sophie, was a one-page contact sheet, emergency contact sheet, which has got the updated numbers, and I liaised with Fire and Rescue Service through Jess Howell to make sure that the numbers were correct for that, and with the districts and everybody listed. That's going to be published on our website too, if it hasn't been already. And it will be as part of this report. I think that was one of the issues. In terms of the specifics of being brushed off over a single issue, I'm afraid I can't comment on the specifics, but if a summary of that could be sent to me, I could certainly look into it, whether it's directly our responsibility or somebody else's. But I agree, nobody should be brushed off, but we do work with the information that we have to hand. And it did become quite clear very early on the 23rd, that what we were seeing playing out on the ground was worse than we thought it was going to be. So again, we rely on local information as much as we do as the official publicly available information, but happy to look into any specifics if it helps.
Thank you, James.
So I'll just come back quickly and just say that officers since then have looked again and they do understand that it is something that needs sorting out. So, but at the time they didn't want to know, but we've talked to them since. Thank you.
Thank you. Sophie, I'll just check with you and if anybody else is looking to speak, because I've got some questions to ask if nobody else is. I can't see anybody. Sophie?
No, I haven't got any more hands my end.
Okay, thanks. James, if you wouldn't mind, there's a particular element that I wanted to pick up on, and you, in your initial presentation, you mentioned sewage backup and overflow, and I think your reference was specifically to the Cirencester area, and if I'm right, that has been a problem in the past around Cirencester, and has I think been linked to new housing developments. If I've got all that right, I'm sure you'll correct me. But it seems to me that this has become an issue, possibly in other parts of the wider area of Gloucestershire. Very specifically for me, in Bishop's Cleeve, in sewage backup and overflow became an issue in December, and it's something that has happened recently at a particular point several times in the last 8 or 9 months. It certainly happened quite significantly just recently, and again it seems to be linked to situations where we have significant new housing development, which, and this is, I appreciate these are subjective remarks, James. You know, it's just what I'm seeing and what I'm thinking is it seems to be related to situations where all of a sudden we get to a point where the capacity, the sewerage capacity, simply gets overloaded due to the additional burden placed on them by new housing developments or new houses. I think, and Vernon might correct me, or Kevin, there were some incidents around Tewkesbury similarly, and possibly other parts of Tewkesbury Borough. I don't know about the rest of Gloucestershire. So I was interested in your remarks. You did raise it in your introduction, and I wondered what your thoughts were on that and how we can take this forward. I appreciate, the cirencester would be Thames Water. For us, it's Severn Trent. But there seems to be a developing problem here with the specific issue of sewage overflow when there are high levels of rainfall.
Thank you, Chair. And yes, that's a good point. It's something that I was discussing with a district colleague of mine, Lawrence King, and it's a glaring omission from my summary report. And when we publish it online, I will be putting that in as one of the lessons learned. I don't want to speak directly for the water and sewage companies, but we've got a couple of issues here. You've got areas where you've got combined sewers, where you've got foul water and surface water using the same network. So obviously when you have these vast quantities of rainfall falling into that, it, as you say, exceeds capacity. You've also got issues where surface water can access a foul sewer network, and again exceed capacity. I believe I would be speaking for the water and sewage companies to say what we need is a strategic approach and investigation of these networks to see if there is any possibility of separating out combined sewer networks into foul and surface water sewers of sufficient capacity. Obviously, an approach like that would be vastly expensive, but it is a key issue. I've had some reports from local people about rather unfortunate incidents where locals have lifted manhole covers of surface water, of foul sewers, to direct surface water away from their property into the foul sewer network, which is a classic example of solving your own immediate problems and causing a much worse problem for your neighbours downstream, which is something that I think we need to look at from an education point of view, to let people know that the actions that they can take can have dire consequences for those downstream. But yes, it is a real issue. I mentioned cirencester because a lot of that is on a combined network, and a lot of work that my colleague Peter Cyrus is doing is trying to separate out surface water or prevent surface water from entering the combined sewer network in times of high rainfall. That's both upstream attenuation and looking at measures in the town itself to attenuate rainwater before it accesses the network so it can do so at a safe rate. But I think it's a higher level conversation to be had with all of the water and sewage companies, perhaps above my level, well, almost certainly above my level, to look at what can be done regionally to carry out those investigations and create some kind of meaningful action plan where the separation of the sewers can be looked into, measures to prevent the surface water accessing the foul network. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but it does go slightly above my level and into the realms of the water and sewage companies, but it is something we're very much aware of, and we're taking local action where we can, but we need a much more significant approach than that.
Well, thank you, James, and it very much, well, it certainly goes a long way to answering my question. It's really about, there are problems now springing up, it appears, more regularly to do with this issue, and what can we do about it? And you've just said we need to take action with the, well, to engage with, take action with the water authorities to find a solution, but at a high level. So, Mike, to bounce that back, if you don't mind, because this issue is of great concern to me, and now seems to be, because it's becoming more prevalent, and it's very easy for water authorities to, I'm not blaming them, but it's very easy for them to turn around and say, okay, will, like, for example, with the one locally that I'm aware of, we'll do a TV scan of the network, and then they'll say, well, there are various problems with people misusing drains and things like that, but and that tends to be the sort of easy answer for any specific issue. But there is clearly a much more significant problem, and you've said, the whole thing about combined sewers. Now, I don't know, I think it might be right that combined sewers are no longer being put in. Is that right? Or they're an old method which has now been is now no longer happening with new estates. But fundamentally, water comes in, as you said. It's not just about combined sewers. Water comes in anyway into the sewerage network, and I think we've got to a capacity point where I am. What can we do? How do we take that forward at that high level, as you said? Because that's what I think we need to do. I don't know how we do that.
Yeah, I mean, thank you. I mean, the water and sewage companies are consulting on their drainage and wastewater management plans at the moment that my team are engaged with. I would suggest, and this is not for me to comment on how business above my level is conducted, but off the back of the drainage and wastewater management plans, perhaps there is scope for greater interaction between the higher echelons of Severn Trent, Thames Water and Wessex Water and the local authorities that they work with. That's something that I would support. Again, we're all in this together. What can we do collectively to solve this problem? All we can do on a local level is do what we can to manage the planning system and to create upstream and urban attenuation to hold surface water back from combined or foul sewers. But yeah, I think it would have to be an approach direct to the hierarchy of the water and sewage companies to create a dialogue and to see what can be done off the back of the DWMPs. Yeah. Again, I'm sorry, I'm not sure if that answers your question, Chair.
Well, yeah, it does. It's just, in that sense, it's a starting point, isn't it? As to at least we're talking about the issue and making people and starting to think about it and how we do something about it, and that's really the point. And actually, that brings us, I think, quite neatly to what do we do now. Thank you very much indeed for your excellent work and report, and to everybody involved. As a report we've had as a committee. Councillor Vernon-Smith has made some thoughts about what he might do going forward. The question I've put to all of us is, do we accept this report and just say, right, thank you very much, or is there something further that we need to do? How are we content with what we've heard and seen at this very moment, and then perhaps come back to it, or is there something that anybody's got in mind that they want to achieve?
Chair, Councillor Orford wanted to come in, but I'm not sure whether you can see him on your screen.
I missed him. So, Councillor Orford, thank you very much, Simon.
Thanks, Chair, and I'm glad you raised the issue that you've raised, because I am aware you've had issues in Bishop's Cleeve, and likewise we had a very serious issue with sewerage in properties in Down Alley, for instance. I noticed a press release yesterday from Severn Trent spending 25 million in Stroud over the next few years. That's obviously going to help Stroud, but I think I think, in fairness to James, he's right. In the common phrase, it's above his pay grade, but the issue needs raising, and James will know. On the RFDC, we do have a representative from Severn Trent, for instance, and I think it's all to do with investment in replacement of some very archaic networks. We go on about new builds. You know, I'm like a dog with a bone about a particular area, and Down Alley just borders that. but we can't just keep building and building and building without that sewerage infrastructure or even drainage infrastructure. So I think one thing you can take from this, I think committee would support, is that high level conversation, probably at cabinet level with and perhaps even with the MPs. I know that some of the MPs have been very busy around the sewerage and drainage issues anyway. So I think from this committee, I think we would support that engagement with the water companies on both counts, one on sewerage, and I know Councillor Hodgkinson is patiently waiting probably for the cleaning up our rivers part of the agenda, for instance. And it all ties in, doesn't it? If you get a flood, you get effluent in a property, that effluent eventually is going to find its way to the main river network or any other major network. So from this meeting, I would like to think that you get the support for that high level engagement in relation to the sewerage and water companies. In our case, most of it is Severn Trent, but I know Councillor Hodgkinson, it would be Thames Water. And I think we need that now. We know climate change is coming. We know weather patterns are changing. We know we're going to get these storms more frequently. And I think now is the time to act. And if we don't push the water companies and sewage companies, then we're going to have bigger and bigger problems. So I'd certainly support what you're saying about the high level engagement.
Thank you very much, Councillor Orford. I think we need to wrap this up now. Obviously, we've spent a long time, nearly an hour and a half, but it's obviously one of the key topics for Gloucestershire, isn't it? And so time well spent. But I think after what you've just said there, and I think comments made earlier on by various people, I think we could just take that theme forward. The difficulty, obviously, at the moment is that this is the last meeting of this committee in this council, and anything that we say, you know, we can't take forward ourselves. But I think if we could make a recommendation, and I'll ask Sophie if she could just record.
Chair.
Sorry. Yes.
Yeah. Sorry, Chair.
Yeah.
Yeah. Could I just come in quickly on what
Sure.
Councillor Alford said?
Yeah.
I think what Councillor Alford's raising are very good points. In just for the committee, you know, I am aware locally, you know, we've got Ashchurch Road, which is a combined system where Gloucestershire Highways are already working with Severn Trent and worked on both worked on the location when it was flooding back in December at the first flood event and the second flood event. We had issues there. We've also got some other issues on sewerage systems, as you say, Chair. And, you know, I know we continue to work with Cirencester because that's a combined sewer system there where you raised that they have issues. So I am working with our local MP, and also obviously Highways are working with Severn Trent to look at these combined systems, how we move them forward. So we are certainly taking them up with the MPs, and maybe it could be something that could be are consider putting in a letter form to the MPs, where we could say, you know, that we need this issue raised, because obviously it is an important issue. We are, as I say, working on the ground, but it does need to be taken higher up, because as Councillor Orford says, it's about funding really. That, you know, replacing combined systems, which have stopped since the 70s, is a substantial cost of money and investment that we need Severn Trent, Thames Water, the other stakeholders to put into for us to all work together. So those actions I will take forward, and have I do pick up on what the committee has said. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Well, thank you, Vernon. In which case, because I was going to say, you know, we just make a recommendation to the cabinet that we engage in and have these high level involvement with, as you say, water authorities and MPs, etc., which you're saying is ongoing. So if you, I guess there's nothing. all we need to do then is to ask you to note the contents of this discussion at this point, and to continue that work.
Fully support your recommendation, Chair. It gives me a bit of more push. You know, if the committee do put that as a recommendation, I'm happy with that if that's what the committee decided.
Well, that seems to be the sensible way forward, unless anybody's got any objection to that, or any additional comment that would change things. It doesn't look like it, in which case we will. I'm just sorry, have I got anybody else indicating? Sorry, Sophie, there was a red mark on my screen. I don't think anybody else is indicating, in which case that will be the recommendation of as an outcome of this report and this committee meeting, and we will move on. Thank you very much, everybody. So going back to the agenda, we did say at the start we would swap items 5 and 6. So next up will be the Restoring Our Rivers one-page strategy, which is pages 41 and 42. We need to review the attached draft one-page strategy for the Restoring Our Rivers task group. And at this point, I need to hand over to Councillors Paul Hodgkinson and Bernie Fisher, who came up with the original motion, to present their one-page strategy. Thank you. Yep. I don't know which one of you is starting.
If I kick off, if that's all right, Bernie, and then I'm sure Bernie will have pearls of wisdom to add. So, so thank you very much for allowing us into the meeting today. Obviously, I was really delighted back in December when you as a committee committed to setting up a task group. So what we then did, Bernie and I, is have a look at what we thought a task group could cover and what its aims would be. So you've got that in front of you. So what we think in terms of the ambitions is obviously there needs to be quite a lot of fact finding. You've just had a very long session on flooding, and obviously river pollution was mentioned there as a key factor. So there's already information we know. But what we would like to do, what we're suggesting, is obviously work with different partners, NGOs, water treatment operators, etc., to understand really the extent of the damage of pollution. So some of us know in our own areas that some of the rivers, like the River Windrush and the River Leach in my area, some has extensive pollution in parts, but what we don't know is the full extent across the whole county necessarily. So we want to try and understand that better. We want to also understand the legal context of what's permitted and what isn't. We know anecdotally, well, actually from the figures for places like Bourton, that Thames Water have discharged far more than they really should have been, although they kind of half accept that, should we say. So we need to understand that, and obviously invite the water treatment operators and polluters to meet with us too. We want to get the whole sort of feel of it. In terms of who we should consult and how, we've talked about the Environment Agency, we've talked about all the water operators that cover the whole of Gloucestershire, so there's 3 of those. Also NGOs and district councils. So NGOs, for instance, Windrush Against Sewage Pollution is otherwise known as WASP, have done some fantastic research and campaigning along the River Windrush, both in Oxfordshire and Gloucestershire. And I think they would be great to listen to and talk to. Also the Rivers Trust. So there's a number of people there. There might be others that people might want to add to. We're talking about 6 months, but obviously after the May election, because we don't know who's going to be here and who isn't. So we'd better wait until then to kick that off. And we think around 6 months to give that task group the full time to actually come up with, first of all, a greater level of understanding, but also then a plan of action for dealing with the river pollution that they can see. What we're hoping for is a roadmap to achieving bathing water status for our rivers. So obviously that's an ambition. Those of us, or whoever are on the task group, will understand whether that's achievable, but we think that's a really good aim to go for, which is the sort of status that some places, particularly in the north of England, are going for at the moment. So Yeah, I think that's it from me. I don't know whether Bernie wants to add.
If I may, Chair. Yeah, it really interesting to see how interrelated the last item is with this item. It is totally related, and we've also got to look at the wider aspect. The Severn is tidal, so whatever we pollute it with just doesn't go down one way, it goes up and down. And there's a knock-on effect from upstream and downstream, and we have the same effect on our neighbours. So we've got to talk to our neighbours. And there's also other polluters, like the increase in intensive farming, like large poultry farms, which are affecting the Wye, intensive dairy farming, which affects many rivers with slurry, and it's got to be looked at in the round, and the pressure's got to go to above as well as to the people who deal with it. Severn Trent are a private company, and their record is not good. If you look at the prosecutions that have been here, and at the moment we don't know the scale of the problem. First of all, we've got to know the scale before you could really attack it. We know it's bad, but we don't know how bad. And we should be looking for Severn Trent to monitor and have accurate records of when they pollute. The combined sewers thing is obviously a thing, and that's something, it spreads further throughout district councils, planning authorities, and major house builders. The officer said that it's very expensive to separate sewers from from drain water. But when you immediately turn the sewers into the flood water or rainwater system, as combined sewers do at the source, but they also do it when we get extreme rain, the cost there is colossal to people's homes and things like that. And the pollution of our rivers is shameful, really. We must address it in a combined method. It's not just looking at it as individual councils. It's got to come from government as well, and the pressure has got to be put on government to fund these things. It really does need that, and that's what we're going to have to look at after the May election. Thank you.
Thank you, Bernie. Well, thank you both for presenting the strategy. The committee has agreed to a task group, and this is the strategy document to support that. Over to committee members for comment, questions on the one-page strategy.
So there's Councillor Cromwell and Councillor Hurst.
Thank you, Sophie. Councillor Cromwell.
Yes, I welcome this because obviously, living by several water courses, it's something that, I have noticed the state of them did downwards, actually. I did, and I am disappointed. I want to know what the buy-in we're going to have from others, because I don't mind doing a task force, but as long as we're going to get buy-in from the relevant authorities that we need to link into, and the reason I'm saying this is because when we had the Environment Agency guy turn up to the meeting and we spoke to him and he spoke to us, I brought up a particular issue with a manhole that I know that overflows, it goes down the road and it turns left and it goes into the River Avon. He said, oh, send me an email, send me the details and I'll get back to you. Not a word since. So my question is, what is the commitment from the Environment Agency and what is the commitment from all the others? Because we can do all the work that we can do. But if we've not got buy-in from those people, then unfortunately that work is going to be wasted. And that is such a shame because it doesn't need to be wasted. So, from my own experience, from that meeting that we had, which I felt was really positive, and somebody said, yeah, send it to me and I'll deal with it. Not a word. So my question is really, are we going to get buy-in from these other departments or are they just giving us lip service?
Thank you, Councillor Cromwell. I'm not sure who can answer that. Councillor Orford's indicating. Were you looking to respond to that?
Indicating to speak, actually, Chair, but it does dovetail. The whole thing dovetails into our last consideration of the last item, and the buy-in. You're quite right. Would have to come from a good many, not least Severn Trent. But also you've got the point was made by Bernie, I believe, about agriculture. So you would need to take evidence or information from perhaps the NFU, for instance. I mean, I'm as keen, and Paul knows, as a proposer, I'm very keen on this one. I supported him when he brought it to council, and it does dovetail into what we've spent the last hour and a half talking about. So. Certainly not. This isn't something I want to just see laying on a shelf. I think we can be a bit proactive. We do know, of course, we don't have much in the way of powers, but we do have the powers of influence and influencing others. So the strategy, I think, reads fine, and I think Kevin's made a very good point about who we would bring to the table and how willing they would be. But I'll let others have a word, and then if you're looking for a proposition, and I'll come back.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Orford. Does anybody else want to come in? I'm looking around. And
Chairman, if I might just add, Councillor
Yes,
Moore,
please do.
I think it's getting to the right people. I mean, Paul and I were both involved with a few years ago with the work in the Cotswolds, which was chaired by Vernon. It took a while because essentially often the wrong people turned up. They were poorly briefed, but of course they did get quite a roasting from the chair, and I think they went away, and next time the right people came. I think we've got to basically do a bit of we've got to expose the inadequacies and make it clear to these organisations that their reputation's at stake. And we do, as just been hinted at, we do have a good capacity in terms of pointing the finger at some of these organisations, and we would do it publicly because these meetings are open. So I think that's the way forward. Really, we've got to get the right people there, and if the right people don't turn up on the first occasion, then make it clear that the next time we need to have that better attention. But I think we've learned a lot actually over the last few years in terms of these organisations.
I guess the message from what you've just said about how to deal with things is we have to be tough, we have to be clear about our objective, and we have to persevere because we won't get it won't come easily. We will need to work hard at it because we're the ones who are in the driving seat. Sorry, my apologies, but was Councillor Hurst, were you looking to speak? You're on mute.
I've actually been looking to speak for about 20 minutes on 2 items ago.
Well, I'm very, very sorry. I didn't.
It's all right. It happens every day. I think that we can't afford to have a working group that comes up with a conclusion that everyone else ignores. Quite funny that Councillor Moore said about we have to point the finger at somebody. But of course, what they do, they give us 2 fingers back. And so we have to be very serious, and we have to really take people to task about the natural resource that our rivers give. And the natural resource is getting more and more polluted as time goes along. And they are really, the Rivers Authority are the only people who really can do anything about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hurst. I can't see anybody else indicating at the moment. Sophie?
Councillor Caldwell as well.
Councillor Caldwell.
Councillor Caldwell?
Yeah, I had my hand up for a while, so you.
Okay.
Yeah, I was. In terms of the people to consult, I think you should add the Severn Estuary Partnership, which is a wide-ranging organisation where I currently represent the county council, and they would have a lot to say about the state of the Severn from very many different perspectives.
So to be clear, you're asking us to add that to the strategy, that name, that body rather, to the strategy?
Yes, please.
Right. Well, I'd go to Councillor Hodgkinson and Fisher. I presume that's acceptable to you?
Yeah, absolutely. And just to sort of follow up on what everybody else has been saying, I mean, I think, yeah, there's no point in having a task force which leads to nothing. But the point, I suppose I would sort of simply say that if we don't do anything, then we know we're going to get nothing. So we should do something with a sort of constructive and positive frame of mind, and make sure that when we, whoever's on the task group, that those who come before that task group, they know fully in advance the sort of things we want to know, that the questioning is probing and sufficiently robust, and that at the end of the day, that if recommendations are made and those organisations do nothing, well, actually, that's a story in itself, isn't it, really? So I hope it would not lead to that, but clearly, I think we've got to do it because we owe it to residents who are rightly concerned about it.
Thank you, Councillor
Hodgkinson. Pointed out there, Rob. Yeah, it's true what everybody said. We've got to push it hard, and the task group have got to talk to people like the Environment Agency and Severn Trent. But in the end, if they do not respect the view and come round and start to improve things, Severn Trent know well they've been fined millions over the years. The ultimate sanction is court. It's the last option, but the Environment Agency should be prepared to put them there. And the Environment Agency should be prepared to pressure them to make sure we know exactly how much sewage and how much pollution is going into our rivers. It's a major problem, and we don't know the size of it. Ridiculous. Monitoring is not a problem. It's a simple solution. But as I said before, relating back to the previous thing, we know our climate is changing, and the climate change, this is affecting it. And so old solutions will not do. And fining doesn't really do the case, it just focuses the mind. What we need is a forward-going plan by the people responsible, private company, Severn Trent, Environment Agency, government agency, to address it in the new light. Things are changing. We can't go in the old way and shrug shoulders, which, as somebody said about Severn Trent, they do shrug shoulders. What can we do? And not good. I have personal problems with Severn Trent in my division, and they don't even come back, as somebody's already said. They don't come back to you. Cheers.
Thank you. Okay, so I mean, we already have a commitment to setting up a task group. Our purpose now was to consider the strategy document to support it. It seems as though it's generally accepted by the committee with that amendment mentioned. A lot of useful comments have been made about how we need to approach this as a task group when it's set up. Councillor Orford, I think you did say you wanted to come back.
And it was only I would come back if you were looking for a proposition from a member of the committee, which I would gladly do. And can I say, in saying that, thank Councillor Hodgkinson and Bernie for bringing this. It's all yours of mine, but it's nice that it's come. It shows we can get along, despite budget meetings, etc., that we can get along and work across the piece for the benefit of others. And I'm grateful to both of them for bringing this forward.
I think we all drink water out of Severn. That's the reason.
I wasn't going to mention what beavers might do in it. No.
Okay. So, Councillor Orford, you mentioned a proposition. I mean, at the end of the day, I think it's our role to say, are we satisfied with a one-page strategy document? What was your...
Well, basically, that this committee recommends that we start a task group at the earliest convenience after the 2021 elections, along the lines of the one-page strategy that's been presented.
Thank you.
With the amendment.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Or partner. Yeah.
I will just. That's the proposal. In general, the tone of the conversation has been to support that, and I will take that as the view of the committee, unless I hear any fundamental concerns or objections.
I would second that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hurst. Appreciate that. Tar. Are we content then that is the position? It looks like it, unless anybody else want to add anything at this point. I'm looking for waving hands. Councillor Orford, you're waving your hand.
I think to widen the thing out in relation to what Dr. Caldwell said, I think we need to broaden that out to any relevant evidence provider. In other words, there could be others. I mentioned the NFU, but there could be others, including the water companies, of course. Yeah.
Okay. We leave that to the task group to decide, I presume.
Yeah.
Okay. I think everybody's in agreement, unless I've missed anything. Have I missed anyone, Sophie? No. Okay. That then is the agreed position, and that's what will go forward. Thank you very much. Thank you to Councillors Hodgkinson and Fisher for bringing that, and to everyone else for their contributions on that. Thank you very much. We shall move on to, that was actually item 6 on the agenda. We'll go back to item 5, which is the...
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. The item on rail developments, and it's a report from Rob Niblett. So I'll hand over. Thank you very much, Rob, for waiting so patiently and for allowing your item to be superseded. Over to you. Mute, Rob. Robert,
Rob, if you're on a computer device, it should just be at the bottom of the screen. There just should be on the left-hand side, there's a unmute button. The only other thing I can think, Rob, if you want to leave the meeting and come back in, it might be that it's stuck, and potentially we can move on to Colin's report and come back.
you okay with that, Rob? If we do Colin's report first and come back to you, okay? That's okay. So we shall go then to item 7, which is the Executive Director's report. Over to Colin.
Morning, everyone. I'll whiz through this quickly because it's been quite a long morning report. Still got Rob to go. COVID, obviously, we're still having its impact right across the board, not least on capacity from sickness, but also the additional work that's created as a direct result responding to COVID, and now bringing the services back online again following the announcements last week or week before. M5 Junction 10 HIF bid. Moving forward, we hope to have a preferred route announcement sometime around June, following the consultation that was carried out before Christmas. The highways contracts all moving forward, because considering what they've gone through recently, amazingly on the structural maintenance now, we had slipped behind, but we've actually got back on program, in fact slightly ahead of program now on structural maintenance. Potholes are largely because of the winter behind as much as you can be in terms of just the sheer volume. What people probably don't realise is that and it seems difficult to believe given the weather we had last weekend, but literally from up to 10 days ago, the team have been on the depots have been on standby and emergency response since probably 2 weeks before Christmas. So it's basically been non-stop with flooding first of all, then the freeze, then the snow, then the thaw, then the flooding, and the rain, and then the snow, and then the freeze again. So, I mean, to give you some idea, we'll probably blow the winter maintenance out of the budget, out of the ground this year. We're looking at probably something close to £300,000 over expenditure. We've already gone through our, I think by about 4 weeks ago, we had gone through our targeted number of runs this year for gritting. We'd already done that 4 weeks ago for the whole winter. So it gives you some idea of what a bad winter it's been in that respect. Ash dieback program is moving forward. And we aim to have, I think it's 7,000 trees planted by the end of this season. And we're now putting in trees at the rate of 2 for every one we take out. We will be putting 2 trees in, not necessarily alongside the highway. It might be at other locations that we're speaking to parish councillors about, because sometimes it's just not suitable to put trees back in the same location because of safety and issues of that nature. And our philosophy in putting trees back on the highway is to put the right tree in the right place. So basically smaller trees close to the curb line, and bushes and hedges, and then as you gradually move back and you've got a wider verge, so you just put the bigger trees in, so they can't cause a danger either from falling branches in the future, or even cars skidding off the road and hitting them. And also it leaves space then for natural regeneration from the space that's created from those trees as well. So again, it's all, you gain even further greening from that effect. Cyber Park and the West Cheltenham scheme moving forward really well, despite actually going on site. Both the phases 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 actually are on target, with phases 1 and 2 to complete by the summer of 21, and phases 3 and 4 by the end of 2021. Phases 3 and 4, with the walking and cycling measures that go in as part of that, they started on site in January. So that's all going forward. Ashchurch Bridge, we've done everything we can now in terms of design. It's now back to the planning committee at Tewkesbury to make a decision in their March planning committee. The Emergency Active Travel Fund, we are still looking at rolling out the rest of that. Our appeal was unsuccessful for the additional funding. We only heard that back yesterday, and that's something we need to take up. And we're looking at other ways of doing that. One thing we're looking at is a national sort of a guy brought in by Chris Boardman at Manchester. Brian Deakin, but I think it's Brian Durkin. He's worked in London and Birmingham, or he's sort of like one of the experts in terms of cycle provision under the new LTN 120. You hit it here first. He's agreed to work with us. We spoke to him this morning. So he's agreed to work with us in basically acting as a critical friend in the development of the project going forward. Electric vehicles report is going up to, it won't be going up to Cabinet. It's going to be a lead Cabinet member decision, which will be the rollout of the electric vehicle charging points in the coming year. School streets, and that's of interest to people. They're currently evaluating feedback from a survey of the 2 school streets that went in, and making changes under experimental CROs in terms of looking at how best to move those forward, and also looking at how we go forward with school streets in the future. Strategic infrastructure, B4603 again really alludes to the Emergency Traffic Active Fund. We're probably now within about £3 million of £2.5 to £3 million of having the full funding for this scheme. We actually have got the full cost as originally envisaged, but since the scheme was passed over to us by Highways England, as I just mentioned, the new guidance for cycle schemes is really strict, called LTN 120, has come in, which has a much higher level of demand placed upon us in terms of our provision of facilities. In addition to that, when we looked at the scheme that had been handed over to us by Highways England, it actually stopped at the Great Western Road and didn't actually go right into the centre of Gloucester, which seemed to be a little bit of a silly move, really. Just to get to a critical point on the network, it stopped, and they were relying really on cyclists to then go around the station and go through the underpass. And the railway have said under no circumstances to allow cyclists to go through the underpass. So we're now trying to look to see if we can find a way to get the cycle provision right the way through into Gloucester using a phasing of the signals at Black Dog Way. And the other aspect is that they hadn't really addressed it in quite the same way properly is the Escort Road roundabout, which again, when we looked at it, it's had 10 cycle accidents in the last 3 years at the junction, plus several walking accidents. So again, really important there that we do address that and not ignore that as part of the scheme. So that's what was caused the increase in costs. M5J9, I'm really pleased to tell you that though you can't say anywhere else at the moment, that we're hoping that we've got the funding. It needs to be confirmed, which we're expecting hopefully in the budget today or in the next couple of days, that we'll have the additional 1.5 million funding that will give us the leverage to then put the cabinet report up at the end of March to then go full systems ahead with Junction 9 over the next year, working up the outline business case and keeping the whole thing on programme as near as we can, given the fact that the Highways England have objected to one of the key options that we were hoping to pursue. So we're in negotiations with them trying to resolve that issue. Improve rail connectivity, I'll let Rob talk about that because he's going to anyway. But there's a little bit of bad news there that we only heard literally yesterday, but I'll leave that for Rob to describe to you, which is about the new services. A417 missing link is now moving forward again. Consultation was carried out end of last year, and it looks like they're now resolved the issues that have been raised by National Trust, and so hopefully that's moving forward. Clancy Road, another positive. We're out of the CPO public inquiry now, the virtual one. There were only 2 objectors, but they're still saying that we've got to wait the full 6 months to get the decision, which will be the 13th of April. However, there are some preparatory works that need to be done, and we're going ahead with those anyway, and they've started this week at the Clancy Priory in terms of the side access provision. LTP goes to full council on the 17th of March. It's probably local plans. I think, well, they're sort of stuck really. We've objected to the Stroud one in quite strong terms. The Forest of Dean one we have commented on. The joint core strategy with the other 3 local authorities is moving forward, but probably moving forward a lot more slowly than anyone expected. And we have had, as identifies in the report, a number of issues to deal with, not least around the management of SIL and the general approach, which Simon and others, and myself, have been well involved in trying to resolve, and not least the impact on the council in respect of our loss of Section 106 for important strategic funding, where we lost several millions already this year because of the approach being adopted by the districts. in respect to the funding that we've always previously received through Section 106 for things like schools, libraries, and other, and transport. Transport not as badly affected because it's become such an essential part of any development. Libraries registration. Libraries will continue to provide a click and collect service during the latest lockdown, and if conditions allow, libraries will be permitted to reopen for browsing after the 12th of April, which we're aiming to start to bring online. Also, we are now putting a project plan in place to roll out the innovation labs, which I think could be something really important in terms of the economic recovery for the county, not least because what it will do is provide a facility in everyone's locality. Every district will have an innovation lab in a library, which will be really good for people to help support themselves into getting into jobs, for training purposes, for others like at our earlier site at Colford, where DWP are running courses there for 16 to 24-year-olds to help them back into work. So again, it gives a facility, an outreach facility that can help people get into work without the need to travel, particularly at the moment with COVID. Registration service, the government's new route map for weddings is going to starts on 21st of June. It was laid before Parliament on the 22nd of February. It removes the old system of signing in a register and replaces it with an IT system, which on the surface of it seems really good, but probably will cause all sorts of problems in trying to get there, not least because people do like signing in a register. But there's also a number of other problems that will be associated with it in terms of how you actually embed it. Waste management, moving forward, we're continuing to, for the moment, keep the booking system, which has received some really good positive reports from members of the public, but looking to refine and upgrade the booking system, which hopefully will give us increase the capacity beyond by making the booking system more efficient. So we're looking into doing that at the moment, and obviously from the end of March we gain an extra couple of hours a day when the daylight went through daylight, so effectively the sites will be open longer, which again will increase the capacity at the sites. Employment skills, the new head of adult education service started in January, and she's really enthusiastic about the job, really throwing herself into it, and the services continue to provide remote services wherever necessary, wherever they can. But for certain groups of people, particularly those, say, for example, haven't got access to computers but want to learn basic IT skills, which during the pandemic has been incredibly important for things like booking food, doctor's appointments, etc. We are still running courses of that type for those groups of people from the centre, which obviously will probably expand a little bit more once we get to the other side of lockdown. And one thing we've just started to do, just to give you some flavour, is as part of the economic recovery, we've set up an employment and skills group, which is really looking at how we can join up the dots on skills and training to better enable people to access, and particularly young people to access, those opportunities that are available to get them into jobs as we come out of the pandemic. Sorry, there's one other thing that wasn't in that report, and it's my fault actually, that because I was so involved in it, I then forgot to put it in, which was but most of you will have already or had the opportunity on Monday to listen to the presentation on the Fusion project, which hopefully those that heard I think was really interesting. And Tom Scott, the Professor Tom Scott from Bristol University, comes really well explaining it. But what it basically is, for those that missed it, is that we are looking to bid for the first fusion plant in the world, as it will be, and the technical centre to be brought to a joint bid by Berkeley and Oldbury using the old Magnox sites. What those who aren't aware of fusion, it is clean, it is green, and it is safe. Literally, it's not like the old nuclear fission reactors. I mean, it's been the holy grail for a very long time. It's always been 20 years away, and it still is 20 years away, sort of thing. But this time it's a much more positive step. The difference with nuclear fusion fusion against fission is that you don't get the meltdown. So you can't have the incidents that happen around the world in different places, Chernobyl and others, because you just basically, it needs energy put in to make it happen. So the moment you flick the switch, it stops. So effectively, you can't get meltdown. You can't get an ongoing process continuing. And well, yes, it does use radio or nuclear fuels, but it's in a really, really small part. I mean, literally a spoonful of tritium is all that's necessary. John's going to correct me for my pronunciation. Is all you need to start a fusion reaction, and then it continues through it actually creates its own energy. The byproducts of it are hydrogen, which are really, really necessary for future energy because it's a clean source of energy in its own self, and obviously the heat to generate electricity. And it also produces helium as well, which is again quite an important gas that's in short supply these days. Even there is suggestion these days it's not being allowed to be used for children's balloons because it's needed for medical practices and advanced engineering practices. So it's, and once it's lost to go straight up to the stratosphere. So it gives an opportunity to collect helium as well. The first, what we're aiming to do is probably put the plant, because we haven't got enough space at Berkeley, put a plant that will be built from about 2030 onwards. We'll go into Oldbury, which is hoping to produce the first clean electricity in the world by 2040. But the initial technical centre would aim to be going into Berkeley, which would give us a real advantage in terms of the technical skills. What it'll do for the area is phenomenal because it'll be billions upon billions upon billions of investment coming in at almost every level. And obviously with the skills centre there at Berkeley, if we're successful, we'll bring skills from all over the world to that centre to continue the development, and it'll put us, Gloucestershire and South Gloucestershire, really at the centre of the world map in terms of fusion. So that probably completes my report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Colin. Very fascinating, particularly that last bit about the fusion project. I have to say earlier on I was tickled by your reference to a click and collect marriage system. It brings forward all kinds of possibilities. Anyway, over to members for any questions and or comments. At the moment,
Councillor Caldwell.
Thank you, Sophie. Councillor Caldwell, there you go.
Yeah, I got no comment on the nuclear fusion one, having declared an interest, but it's tritium. Yes, on waste management, it's disappointing to see the 13 days at Pike Quarry. Some time ago, there were plans to extend that site, but I don't know whether they actually happened or not. I can't recall now, and whether any extension is possible for the neighbouring landowners.
Nigel, did you want to deal with it? Nigel, leave Nigel deal with this one.
Yeah, I share your frustration. I mean, John, one of the extraordinary things at that site is there's a lot of no-shows.
Yeah.
So what we're looking to do with this new booking system, essentially will give people the opportunity, if they want to change their appointment, they'll be able to do so. And I think that will start to get more traction at that site. That's one of the issues we want to deal with, John, and that will be one of the advantages of this new booking system, which we've now resourced and we're working on.
Thank you.
Anybody else looking to ask?
Councillor Cromwell and Councillor Wolford.
Okay, I'll go to Councillor Cromwell first then.
Thank you. Yeah, on the click and collect at the waste sites, we'll all use click and collect on everything now, marriage and waste sites and everything. We'll adopt that, shall we? I've had several people saying to me they find it really good, and I've had several people saying to me that they find it a pain. And it's obviously, I think we've had a chance to bed it in, and I think obviously, like you said, if we can improve the efficiency, I think the ones who are against it may well then get turned around a little bit. But I mean, I think it's old habits die hard. But I have I've had several people say it's quite good. The problem with Tewkesbury is just up the road from us at Up to the Pond 7, you can just turn up and dump there. So of course, I think because they have a chance of going to either or, that's why, you know, some people are still saying they don't particularly like it, because obviously we're adopting something different to a neighbouring authority, which, you know, for some of us we're quite close to.
I mean, I'll be honest, I was gobsmacked, because I think Nigel was a bit as well. I mean, I thought we'd probably get, when we did the public consultation, we'd probably get a 50-50 split or something like that. And what came back was amazing. It was probably about, I think it was 84% satisfaction level, with 90% of people in one site saying they wanted to retain the existing system with a very, very strong. I mean, the comments coming back were, were written comments like, you must retain the system, which surprised me. It really did, because I actually thought we'd get a bit of a pushback with people being controlled and restricted, not being able to pop down the tip when they wanted. I think people have seen it as a real benefit, that they get their slot, they go there, they don't have to wait or queue, they go straight in and they're out again. So those are prepared to plan. Unfortunately, it's not one of my natural instincts. I tend to fill my car up and then go down the tip. So it sort of runs against my natural instincts. So I was one of the ones who thought it probably wouldn't work as well as it has, and it has been incredible, actually.
Thanks, Councillor Cromwell and Colin. Councillor Orford.
Yeah, just two quick ones. Nigel, in relation to the local transport plan, obviously you would be aware I'm constantly under pressure in relation to the A417, the northern section, the failed bid from 2015. I wonder if we are doing any preparation work on maybe submitting another bid there. And following on in relation to waste, well, you saw what I had from my local resident in relation to the waiting times for the Hempstead tip. And I think you met yesterday, so I'm welcoming your response so that I can feed back to the gentleman, but I don't think he'll be very happy with whatever response we give. But yeah, those two, that's all I've got, Chair.
Councillor Orford, yes, we did discuss this yesterday. I'm going to let you have a written response. We suspect, in fact, he's probably a van driver, given the delay he was talking about. And one of the benefits of the booking system, frankly, it has deterred. We did have a problem with trade people coming to the sites and then masquerading as being non-trade. Somehow the booking system seems to have deterred them, because clearly they've got to give their registration. So that's had a beneficial impact in terms of reducing the amount of illegal trade waste coming to the sites. On your first point, I'll have to pick that up with officers and with Colin, because clearly in terms of any bids for finance, Phil, I need to talk to Colin about that. So can I put it on the agenda?
Thank you both. Sorry, Councillor Orford, were you looking to come back then?
Yeah, just in relation to that, I don't know whether the gentleman is in fact a man with a van, but of course one of the issues we have seen, sadly, through all this is the higher incidence of fly tipping, and you won't stop that, will you? Particularly if people have got to wait that long. And in relation to the A417, if that in fact doesn't get any inertia, then I would like at some stage to talk to maybe you about other alternatives that might be achievable at a lesser cost. But that's for the future. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Orford. Councillor Hurst.
Thank you, Chair. Could I please ask the Councillor Moore if you could ask officers to do some homework on attempting to reduce the waiting time at Pike Quarry. It's now into its third week to wait for a slot to take your waste. And of course, waiting for such a long time does have the added disadvantage of encouraging fly tipping. So could I ask you to do homework, please, Councillor Moore?
I would challenge that. I mean, basically, fly tipping is a national problem. We've done some work. Oxfordshire don't have a booking system. and in fact, the incidence of fly tipping there is probably pretty much comparable with Gloucestershire. So I think that's a bit of an urban myth, quite honestly. I just don't think people who have to wait those extra days to go to the HRC will then go out and just dump their stuff somewhere else. It is a criminal activity. It's criminal people who never go anywhere near an HRC, Stephen. Yeah, Stephen, as I said to Councillor Caldwell, I acknowledge the difficulties at Pike. We feel with a new booking system, which will give us a more responsive system, because at the moment you can't alter your booking. If you change your mind, you can't booking, so that booking slot goes unused. For whatever reasons, which is hard to understand, the incidence of people not turning up is greater at Pike than anywhere else. So very enthusiastic, but for whatever reason, they don't always turn up. We're hoping that with the new booking system, they will be able to revise their booking, which will free up those slots.
Well, let's hope so.
Yeah, well, that's the first step, Stephen.
Could I just go in, Chair? The other thing is that what we did do is, conscious of the comments that were made about fly tipping, we don't clear up fly tipping. So if you're going to create an increase in fly tipping, the people who immediately become involved in that are the districts. So we went to the districts and asked them, and their feedback was there'd been no noticeable increase in fly tipping from their perspective. Now, they would be the first ones to shout really if we were causing that problem, because they're the ones who clear up that fly tipping mess. So, what Nigel has said is absolutely spot on. That you get the hardened people, the hardened criminals that are just going to do it anyway. It doesn't matter whether there's a booking system or not; they'll do that. And the rest is very, very marginal if there is any increase at all.
Okay, thank you. Over to Councillor Patel.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question on the waste management and the waiting times again. Just curious whether there would be a possibility perhaps of 1 day a week where we can look at operating on a non-appointment system, whether that's something worth trialling, especially at the locations where the waiting times are quite high, to help sort of ease the problem for the local residents. Just to point at, I visited Hempstead, a recycling centre on Saturday last week, and I think the appointment system works really well. It's worth the wait. We were in and out in no time. You know what your slot is. You got the time to load your car or van or whatever, and it was real straightforward. But I'm just wondering whether that's something we can try with regard to reducing the waiting times, perhaps on a Sunday where we're going to get more visits at the locations, or would it be a big issue with regard to planning planning things in terms of social distancing, etc. And just a point with regard to the fly tipping, I totally agree with the comments that have just been made. We have an issue with fly tipping in my ward, and I would say the 99% of the fly tippers would have no intention of making an appointment or visiting the recycling centre whatsoever. And I'm pleased to say we have been using CCTV to catch and identify and fine fly tippers, and I think in the last month we issued 20 fixed penalty notices for £400. So yeah, thank you very much.
Sajid, if I may reply, I'd be very uncomfortable with that suggestion, because first of all, I've got to think about the safety of our staff in terms of this. COVID's not going to go away. I mean, we're going to be living with this for quite some time, and one of the things I've really appreciated in my role is the kind of emails I get from people really saying that they've found the visit safe, comfortable. They've been shown to their slot. People have helped them. I think on a Sunday, if we went along with your suggestion, I think it would just be
free for all. Free for all,
exactly, Colin. Thank you. And I wouldn't be comfortable, Sajid, because ultimately the buck stops with me, and the safety of both the public and the staff is crucial.
I mean, I wouldn't be. I mean, because it'd be like taking the plug out almost. I think if you should do that on a Sunday, I think that could be quite well at the moment in particular. I mean, we've still got 2 or 3 months to go to get to the other side of COVID, if we do indeed get to the other side of it properly. And during that time, the reason the booking system was brought in was for that reason. What I'm hoping is that the new booking system, the new electronic system, will give us an increased capacity. And in 3 weeks' time, we do get the extra 2 hours a day, which is quite a big increase in the in the capacity of the sites. I mean, I don't think we'll cure Pike overnight. It's something we need to work on if we are going to keep a booking system, about seeing how we can actually refine the operations there. And maybe on the other side of COVID, we can relax the space, increase the capacity, the throughput. But at the moment, we have to keep that space in there to protect both the public and the members of staff.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Patel. Okay, Sophie, at the moment, I can't see anybody else indicating.
Councillor Cromwell.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Councillor Cromwell, over to you.
You mentioned very quickly with Phil Orford's problem about the person being a van driver. The issue that I quite often have with the tips is the fact that I do own commercial vehicles as well as having a car. And if I want to take rubbish from my house to those tips, what would I put it in? I wouldn't put it in my car and try and ruin my car. I'd put it in my commercial vehicle because that's kitted out to exactly do that. The problem is with doing that is I then fall foul of the commercial rule, because people then, I've even been turned away because they're saying you're being commercial. I said, well, actually, no, I've bought the rubbish from my house, but I'm not allowed, they wouldn't allow me to tip it. This is pre-booking. And I've had this several times from other people that I know in the building trade. If you've got a van parked outside or a pickup parked outside your house and you want to take rubbish to the tip, you're not going to put it in your car and ruin your car. You only put it in your car if that's the only option you've got. If I got another option, and so people who have got those commercial vehicles fall foul of our system. And I wondered if on the new booking system you could, account for that in some way, because I'm not going to put it in my car. I refuse to if I've got a flipping pickup or a van outside.
Well, what we have been doing is, for the most part, a lot of people do get in, and they get in, with their light vans. What we have been doing though, and medium-sized vans, is because of the recording system, we're now able to track those vehicles. So, like if we're getting those vehicles coming up a couple of times a week, we can now and have been contacting those drivers to let them know that we know that in actual fact, with all due respect, Kevin, like you might go there 2 or 3 times a week for maybe a couple of weeks if you're doing some house renovation. You don't do that every day for 4 months. And as we're starting to see more and more of those patterns emerging, so we're actually able, because we've got the registration marks of the vehicles, to actually now check and challenge those drivers that are. So it's not, in actual fact, it actually, I would argue, it actually lends itself probably better to the person who has a van who use it occasionally for their home use, rather than a commercial vehicle where they're trying to pull one over on us by avoiding the normal commercial tipping rates, by going to tip, because we've got a record now that they've been there 3 times in a week and they've gone back the following week 3 times in a week. So it just gives a bit more control as well.
Okay, moving on. Again, anybody else at the moment? Sophie, have you got anybody?
No, I haven't got anyone indicating.
Okay. In which case,
thank you.
Thank you to Colin. Thank you very much. And excellent. And glad to hear that the work on the M5 Junction 9 is progressing. I'll just say that. And thank you to Colin for all your influence in that on that particular issue. And we will move on then and go back to what was item 5, which was, it's over to you, Rob. If you, I noticed you've kept your microphone on all the way through. Presumably you didn't want to sit off again. Over to you, Rob, for the rail developments report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and apologies for the technical hitch earlier on. My connection dropped out. So can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Right, okay. Not surprisingly, the COVID the pandemic has had a catastrophic effect on passenger numbers. Obviously, numbers have gone down in proportion to the level of restrictions in place. As a result, the government have put all the franchises into emergency measure agreements where they take the risk on the revenue, and the train operating companies are now paid just to run the services. One particular issue that arose last year was the level of service or lack of level of service on the South Wales line with the stops at Chepstow and Lydney, and the impact that was having on pupils going to school in Gloucester and Cheltenham. That was exacerbated by Transport for Wales terminating their services at Gloucester. The Transport for Wales services have been largely restored. A lot of the cross-country ones have been restored, but there's still a gap in the afternoon service for pupils returning from schools from Cheltenham and Gloucester into the Forest, but that is going to be restored, we're told, in May this year. So the longer term impact of the pandemic on rail numbers and rail services is clearly going to be very difficult to predict. It seems likely that commuting won't return to previous levels with increased working from home, and probably the morning and afternoon peaks will be more spread across the day, if at all. There's likely to be a bounce back possibly in leisure travel that was sort of witnessed to an extent last summer when restrictions were eased, and business travel itself seems likely to be hit because of the again the increase of working from home. So so the rail industry isn't really in a state of flux like a lot of industries, obviously. But it's worth pointing out that clearly that rail has a critical role in reducing carbon emissions, congestion on the road network, etc. And as such, the rail industry, Network Rail, are still doing a large amount of background work on long-term planning for demand post-COVID. And this is something that the Gloucester County Council have been heavily involved in, and in particular the Birmingham to Bristol line, which Network Rail are looking at now, trying to forecast future service levels for that. And that's something that we're obviously key to engage with, because that's a critical route for us. The aim of the Network Rail study is to try and reconcile the various competing interests of organisations, operators along the route. But for us, the key objective is to try and get additional local regional services on the route that will better connect places like Cam, Dursley, Gloucester, Ashchurch in particular, up to Worcester and into Birmingham. Also, just to point out that the recent Network Rail traction strategy document highlighted all the lines in the county for future electrification, but no date was given, and clearly that's going to be an expensive exercise. And the County Council is a member of the North Cotswold Line Task Force, which we've been supporting since its inception, which deals with services from Worcester to Oxford, Corlin at Morton in the Marsh. With regard to new stations, we're in line with the local transport plan review and previous editions. We're committed to working with the rail industry to look at the possibility of new stations, or a new station south of Gloucester. And recently, the third round of the DFT Drawing Your Railways bid has been announced, so we're bid for a study to look at the possibility of a new station south of Gloucester. So in conclusion, Chair, the impact of the pandemic on the rail industry is very difficult to predict. It's like the long-term plan, make sure that we're in a good position as and when things return to some degree of normality and we can capitalise on the new infrastructure and services. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Over to committee members. Any comments or questions for Rob?
Councillor Caldwell.
Thank you. Councillor Caldwell.
Hello, Rob. Thank you for that summary of what's going on. On the issue of new stations, I'm sure we welcome another station just south of Gloucester. I'm delighted at the progress that's been made on Charfield, which itself is almost a Gloucestershire station and serves people in Gloucestershire. I do wonder whether it would be possible through using long passing loops to increase the capacity of that line and allow more stopping services and more stations. But of course, it also depends on the willingness of train operation companies to stop at more stations. There's also a lead time between the station reopening and putting it on the timetable, because it takes about a year or so of being on the timetable in advance of a reopening. I'm the only person who's opened a rail station in Gloucestershire. In fact, I've opened 2. So look forward to more being opened. Thanks very much.
Well, they say you learn something every day, and Councillor Caldwell, you always surprise us. Thank you. Rob, you want to come back?
Well, just to thank Councillor Caldwell for his comments, and yes, it is a difficult process opening new stations, and clearly one of the priorities is to try and increase capacity on the line by increasing line speed, improving signalling, so that more services can be fitted in, and that would be the attraction, or one of the attractions of electrification, that it allows greater acceleration and higher speeds. So that is clearly critical. But yeah, Councillor Caldwell is quite right that train operators tend to be resistant, or some are resistant to new stations, whereas in particular cross-country have always objected or expressed objections to new stations on the route because it slows down their fast services. Somewhere like GWR would probably be more supportive because they operate a lot more local services in the county. So yes, this is something we have to try and resolve. Yeah.
I can see Councillor Hurst, so I'll go to you first. Apologies if I've missed anybody who was up before him. Councillor Hurst.
Thank you, Chair. Colin did give advance news that there was some bad news to impart.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry. Completely forgot that in the excitement. Yeah, basically, we've been working on as part of the Metro West Phase 2 project that the West of England Combined Authority are running in the Greater Bristol area. One of the benefits of that was an additional service that was planned between Bristol and Gloucester that would have led to a half-hourly service instead of the hourly service. And that's something we've been working on for about 4 or 5 years. We were promised initially pre-pandemic, or just at the start of the pandemic, that the service would start in December this year. But GWR, after several chasing emails, confirmed yesterday that it won't start. It's not likely to start till next year, probably May 2022, partly because of the effect of COVID on driver training. They have to, obviously, on new routes, trying to get new drivers in, they have to be trained up, and the COVID restrictions have put that behind, unfortunately. And the same applies for we've been campaigning for years and years for a decent service to Worcester, which at the moment only gets a service every 2 hours, which calls at Ashchurch, which is not really a service as such, really. And that was going to be made into an hourly service, and that unfortunately has been, like the other one, postponed till next year. So yeah, sorry, I should have mentioned that earlier.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving on. Anybody else looking to speak? I can't see anyone at the moment. No, Sophie's shaking her head. That's sort of, yeah. Okay. Okay. In which case, unless anybody else suddenly bursts in, no, doesn't look like it. In which case, I will just say to Rob, thank you very much for that. And apologies for the fact that you had to wait so long to deliver that. And you very kindly allowed your item to be superseded, which might then have been your undoing, unfortunately. But anyway, thank you. We got there eventually. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me. Cheers.
Thanks, Rob. Okay. The last item on the agenda is item 8, which is work plan. I mean, obviously, you know, we are coming to the end of this committee. Well, this is the last meeting of this committee, I should say. It's really quite simple. I don't know if anybody wants to say anything about the work plan with a view to the future committee that will take over. Councillor Orford, were you indicating there, or was that?
Just to say, since it's the last meeting, yeah, thank you, Chair, for the chairmanship over this last session, and my thanks to members, really, about how well this committee works in a non-political way. I think it demonstrates good scrutiny doesn't have to be political. So, thanks to all involved.
Well, thank you very much, Councillor Orford. And in fact, some way you've got in ahead of me there, because I was going to say that's fine. As you've just said, it's at this point, because it's a slightly sad occasion for me. Actually, it's the last meeting of this committee in this council, and you know, when the committee reconvenes, there will be a new set of members. A new set of council members and a new committee. So, I would like to just personally thank everybody who's been involved in this committee over the last 4 years. Some excellent work has been done, some excellent outcomes. As Councillor Orford said, in a very non-partisan, non-political, practical, looking to serve our residents to the best that we can way. And I'm very grateful to you all. Obviously, not everybody here at the moment was here 4 years ago, but some are, and we've had other members who've come and gone. I'd like to say a big thank you to officers for all their hard work. I mean, some incredible reports, a lot of incredible work, very detailed, and obviously that's had a big impact. And I would like to say a particular thank you to Sophie. And Sophie in particular, obviously, for her support as our designated support from Democratic Services, but also to her colleagues who've come in and also helped. And if you remember, Laura did Sophie's role before that. So thank you to all of you. And I think that's pretty much all enough to say. Councillor Caldwell.
Well, I just wanted to say goodbye and good luck, because I'm not standing again after 40 years. I decided it was time to step down for a bit.
Well, thank you, John, and we will miss you. But thank you very much for all your hard work and your great contributions. Very effective contributions, I might add. I'll just check. Does anybody want to say anything about the work plan? I guess not. No. Okay, that's fair enough. Well, I've said what I need to say now at the end of this committee. Does anybody else want to say anything before we finally conclude? It doesn't look like it. Unless, Sophie, I'm not missing anyone, am I? No. Okay. In which case, on that note, once again, thank you to everybody. And goodbye. See you somewhere soon. All right. Cheers.